Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to 70 to You. It's really great to have you all here this evening. We're just going to wait for 2 more minutes for people to join us. We'll start at 6:02. While you're waiting, please make sure that you are subscribed to all of our channels on WeChat, Facebook, Instagram, and all of our other social medias. I'm dropping the links in the chat box right now. This is going to be the main way that you guys can follow up with any of the information that is presented to you during this presentation today, and also to stay tuned about further events that we have in the coming months. And so, yeah, thank you all so much. We're going to start at 6:02. While we're actually waiting for more people to trickle in, I just want to quickly talk about two more free classes that we have coming up in December. On December 5th, our speaker today, actually, Dr. Neiman, will be again teaching a free trial class of his SAT reading class that he teaches with us every year. This will be a real class that normally students will have to pay for, but it will be free instead, and it will be an interactive online classroom, just like the rest of the SAT reading courses. He will be covering various strategies to use on the SAT reading portion and how to avoid major traps on the test. Our other event in December is on December 12th called Early Decision Results Are Released. What's next? Where we will go over topics ranging from how to deal with a deferral to deciding what other schools you should apply to. I'll send the information to register for both these free events into the chat box right. All right, everyone, let's get started. Welcome to 70U's open class, everything you need to know about taking the SAT right now. So whether your SAT was canceled in August due to the pandemic, how lots of strategies to boost your score, how to know if you have to retake the test, how to avoid running out of time, and any other questions that you may have. So let's get started with our event. So first off, I want to introduce all of you to our amazing speaker and 70U SAT teacher, Dr. Neiman. With a PhD in English literature and over 10 years of hands-on classroom experience, Dr. Neiman has an enduring passion for helping students master every facet of language-based testing challenges. Oh, Dr. Neiman's here with us tonight. He's turned on his camera now. Dr. Neiman knows that these challenges transcend the SAT itself and loves preparing students for a lifetime of success, facilitated by an unshakable foundation in critical reading, writing, and rhetorical awareness. Dr. Neiman is also certified to teach English as a second language, and so he has the flexibility and enthusiasm to help every student meet every student exactly where they are and move together towards their personal goals. He will be teaching several 70U SAT courses this winter season, starting in December and ending in March, and we'll talk a little bit more about those courses later. But for now, without further ado, let's get started with our questions from Dr. Neiman. Hey, Dr. Neiman, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing? I hope everybody's doing great tonight.
Awesome. Well, let's get
Awesome.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, so the first question that we have for you tonight is coronavirus canceled my test, unfortunately. And so what do I do now?
I feel like my first thought about this is it depends on what year you guys are in school. I know we have about 27 people in the room now and more people might roll in, but my first thought is to keep studying. And I feel like there are a couple of the questions we're going to address tonight that might have some overlap, but even if you're looking at a set of schools and you feel like it might not seem like it's required and it might end up being test optional, I still think that for a lot of you guys, you are going to exclude yourself by default from a lot of opportunities, even at undergrad, from like scholarships and external rewards and different types of competitions, because the filter on so many of these applications will still be specific and they will still want SAT scores for a lot of things. And so I think the best piece of advice is to stay the course. Like I feel like I totally understand for all of us why some people want to take this as like a kind of snow day of like being excited, and as soon as you feel like it's not required, the instinct is to let it go. but I would recommend that people lean into it. And especially now that we're in this peculiar transition time, and a lot of schools, even if they are going test optional and not test blind, I think that these institutions are going to really struggle to make sure that they're enrolling their student body appropriately. And that I even know from working at UCI that if you have a school with 25,000 people at it, you have a very real practical challenge to get students in classes where they will thrive and where the class environment will be complementary and everyone can work toward a shared goal. And the idea of just stripping away every common measure, I don't think is really reasonable or possible from an institutional perspective. So I feel like even if your test date is canceled, lean in and keep prepping and keep working, and I would stay the course. That's my first thought for that question.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Well,
And I think sort of along the same lines, I guess, a lot of folks here are probably taking the SAT, the test date in December, it seems like.
yeah,
And so I guess a really good question right now would be, how do I raise my score in the last month before my test?
yeah. This is oh, someone even just said that December was canceled for you too. It is 2020 has been wild, friends, hasn't it? For people who are looking to boost the score in the last month, I would say to a lot of you guys that there is so much ground you can pick up quickly, even right before a test date. And so I could teach you guys something so simple, even right now, that you guys have probably never heard of. And for SAT reading in particular, there are very tangible, small, specific things that can change your score completely. And the one specific thing I was just thinking of was this term I use called a yolk. And I don't mean like an egg yolk, like your scrambled eggs. I'm thinking of yolk from that. It's kind of like an archaic use of like agricultural terms of yoking the two horses so they walk and pull a plow in the same direction. And it's a term that fits perfectly what the test writers do often for their answers, is that they will actually yoke two similar words that are not the same. And so let's say like there's a particular I have so many tests pulled up from like earlier today I was working, and if you annotate your exams, guys, and you only look for yolks, you will probably see somewhere between 20 and 30 of them every single test. They're used everywhere. It transcends question type. It could be a big picture question, it could be an evidence-based question, it could literally be anything. And I am looking at a particular exam that's in front of me, and I can just let me read this answer. You don't even need to see it. He had become too famous where he previously worked and changed locations. Worked and changed. And so, what the test writers do with these yolks is that half of the yoke is correct, the other half is inaccurate. But when your brain reads these two things linked by and, your brain consolidates them very quickly, almost without your permission. And so, they tend to yoke concepts that are adjacent, similar, but distinct in an important way. So if you're trying to boost your score in a finite amount of time, you need tangible, practical, specific advice like that so that you can start to see the answers in a new way and change your reading habits and change your reading practices. And that's what I love doing as a coach. I feel like that it's really difficult sometimes, especially on the reading, when you guys feel like you're plateauing or when you feel like you don't have a ton of time left to prepare, because you may think to yourself, I can't become a better reader in a month. And my response to that is that you guys, you're already a good enough reader, that you don't need to change your fundamental reading baselines. You need to change your approach to the test. And that's something that you can do as quickly as I just taught you about a yoke. You could go and notice yolks now in your answer choices that you wouldn't have been able to do that before. So I think if you're trying to boost quickly, it's a matter of changing practices and how you examine answer choices, not worrying about changing your fundamental reading habits. I think that's what I would
Wow.
say. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that
yeah,
tidbit of like that strategy with all of us. And
yeah.
that actually leads us really perfectly into our next section here. So, Dr. Neiman, I know you've taken the time to prepare some visual demos for us to actually go through some practice problems and answer some of these critical questions that we have for students. And so, I'll just really quickly read out the two questions, and then Dr. Neiman, you can go ahead and take over with sharing your slides. So, First of all, is the exam a fair assessment? And what is it really even assessing? And then also, how does the SAT reading differ from just simply reading that you do in your regular school coursework? And
Right.
so, without further ado, yeah, if you want to take it over and start sharing, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Perfect. I think let's see here. Are we good here? Let me see if I can go into presentation mode.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So, guys, this is a really important question about the fair assessment and is it fair? The answer is a little bit complex. It has two parts to it. The first is a resounding no. That when I say the exam isn't fair, what I mean by that is not that the exam is not objective. It is objective. It has to be, or else the College Board would have been sued out of existence by now. And so, like, everybody has so much animus towards the College Board in so many different ways, all of us. And I feel like the fairness when I answer this question and say no, when I'm not saying that it's not objective, but I am saying that the deck is stacked because the way that they write the test is a way that is unique. It's a way that if you haven't studied the test extensively, there are things happening in it that you wouldn't normally notice that are very frustrating for a normal reader, for someone who's coming out of your high school coursework. So let me show you guys this. Let me see right here. This is my favorite question to teach you guys this lesson of how the deck is stacked and that there's a kind of intrinsic unfairness to the way the test works. So this is a very simple passage. The premise of it is so basic. It's an Edgar Allan Poe passage. And in the passage, two people meet and they become friends. And then they kind of pal around France. And if you look off to the right and you look at this sentence, the narrator's friend's name is Dupin. And so he's talking about meeting Dupin in the library because they both like the same type of books. And then he says, "We saw each other again and again. I was deeply interested in the little family history which he detailed to me, with all that candor which a Frenchman indulges, whenever mere self is his theme." This is a funny little line in part because there is sarcasm baked into the line. And if you look at question number 3, the narrator uses the phrase whenever mere self is his theme in line 20 to refer to what? The reason I'm using this question to talk about fairness is because the test writers know the truth of this line. The truth of this line is Edgar Allan Poe is taking this like low blow, funny comedic shot at the French and literally insinuating that they tend to be braggarts and that they lack humility. That is the truth of this line. And so that is the most truthful way of reading this section. But you don't get the truth in the 4 options for number 3. You don't get anything close to the truth. The closest thing you get to the truth is actually letter B, but it's an inversion of the truth. It's actually the opposite of the joke. So if you read B, the humility that can result from frequently discussing oneself, the test writers know that this is actually about arrogance. And so they're kind of almost having a joke at our expense right here by giving you something that is most topically relevant, humility, but they're inverting it and they're taking it away from the true meaning of arrogance. And they're saying it actually means humility when it doesn't. In the context, this is a sarcastic utterance. And so B is the opposite of the truth. If you look at C, D, and A though, so if we say, okay, B is the opposite of the truth, they must have given us something truthful. They didn't. And the technically correct answer here is A. And let me read A for you. A situation that is of special interest to people of a certain nationality. That is ridiculous. Like if you really kind of meditate on that line, if we said that phrase to someone who I had not given the summary of the passage about Dupin and the friend and they meet and they pal around, you would literally have no idea what this passage is even about. Situation, people, some nationality, a type of interest. The words are persistently abstract and there's no specificity, there's nothing concrete about them. Your brain is going to reject A. It will refuse it's very difficult when I work with students one-on-one, 90+% of people get number 3 wrong because the brain has a bias towards specificity. So people pick B because of humility and the word mere self or the phrase mere self. People pick D because it actually at least says like different types of people, which the word types has a quantity Q on it. And so we're only talking about the French. So that's like one really practical thing that's incorrect about D. And most people don't pick C. So it's usually B and D are the most common traps. But this is a great example of how the test is not fair because it's not testing the truth. It is, they're creating these degrees of technicality. How much can we strip away from an answer so that it's technically correct, but that it actually communicates nothing? And that's a pretty tough spot to be in. If you don't have a coach or you're not working with anyone, it's very difficult to figure out how and why a terrible answer like A is correct, even when it's not truthful. So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about fairness. This is the thing though, if you look at question number 3, if you look at 4 and 5 that came right after number 3, this should only make everyone's blood boil just a little bit more. So I always call question number 3 relatively wrong questions, where you have no truthful answer, you have degrees of wrongness, which are very difficult to sort through when you're working. The College Board is so savvy that they have constructed a psychological experience with the exam. So if you face a question like this, where they're all wrong answers, you slow down. It really drags the pacing to a standstill because you feel trapped. They foul it up with something that's too easy. This design is very savvy and kind of evil, that then they give you 4 and 5 where all A, B, and C are essentially true answers. And so you make the opposite error. After you have been stuck on number 3, 4 seems way too simple. And so people typically pounce on A or B because they stop adjudicating C and D. So it's like they give you the opposite problem of overconfidence on 4 and 5, and then you make another error. And you can actually see too quickly in 4 and 5, this is an evidence-based pair question. It's so terrible to get 3 wrong on fiction. You guys tend to do well on fiction, and in this particular exam, 3, 4, and 5, they fall like dominoes. And so they created this pothole that everyone gets trapped in this the first passage, which is kind of a nightmare from a testing perspective. Um, if I'm going to narrate this quickly, but A and C are not only true factually, but they actually sound perfect. And you can see how the test writers duplicated actual word choices from the passage in the answer. So you can see in line 18, I was deeply interested, and you get A, interested in Dupin's life and lineage. It's perfect, right? It sounds perfect. Then you get C, when it's amazed that they both had the same interests. It's the same type of language. It's remarkable. It's the same books. It is a fundamental overlap between answer language and passage language. And then look at B. So A sounds perfect. C sounds perfect. How does B sound? B says, excited by the nature of Dupin's virtues. The lines that go with B, when we're talking about virtues, I know we have a lot of people in the room. What's the first thing that you guys think of when I say the word virtue? Just off the top of your head, flood the Zoom chat. Virtue, and you think of what? First thing, total word association game. If I say virtue, your brain thinks what? What is a virtue? Not even a definition, but like if anything even occurs to your mind. What typically happens when I ask people this is that they all produce language about morality. They'll say generosity, they'll say morals, they'll say, somebody once said, my friend Gina is so nice, it made me think of her. Niceness, kindness. This answer choice is connected to something that has nothing to do with morals or virtue. The first definition of virtue, it's connected to creativity. B would sound as good as A and C if they replaced the word virtue with creativity, excited by the nature of Dupin's creativity. But alas, they flip-flop the word. They put in a word that creates a sound of dissonance, but of course, B is correct. So A sounds perfect, C sounds perfect. B sounds less perfect because they created friction in the word connotation for you guys, which is terrible. And so how do we make this decision? This is something, when we talk about fairness, that really galls people. The question had a superlative word in it, most, and you cannot adjudicate between A, B, and C unless you notice above all. That is the only way to get this correct, is to know that most superlative equals above all. So there's a kind of real technicality here. This is the kind of stuff where you think, is this fair? Maybe not, but you have to play the game the way it's built. And I always, if I'm saying that the test is not fair, it doesn't mean that it's not predictable. And that's always my goal, is to help coach you guys into these signals, these patterns, and these cues, because they are predictable. And so even though it might not feel fair at first, when you learn the rules of the game the way they built it, things get so much easier. You will, when I work with people one-on-one and in group classes too, we talk about superlative language to the point where that would be the first thing that you notice about question number 4, as opposed to the last thing that you never see. I can actually sort of bend in that second question here too, when we're thinking about not just fairness, but how reading for SAT is really different than reading for coursework. You can see in 3, 4, and 5, this is not conceptual reading. This is not the kind of reading you get rewarded for when you read for classes at school. I always make it the comparison that it's more of like a kind of legal reading. It almost reminds me of the type of reading that lawyers have to do, that it's very technical, it's often very literal, hyper literal, and it is rooted in very small detail. It's not conceptual or holistic. And you guys are taught to read holistically at school. We all were. I was too. If you can look at this question, this is a great example to show the way they punish you guys for reading holistically and conceptually. So you don't even need to know anything about this passage and the context of it, except that Klaus is the main character and he has this kind of fraught, difficult relationship with his mother. And question 8 says, the promise in line 23 is best understood to refer to what? If you look at all of those underlines in blue, 3 of the 4, they are holistic, conceptual answers that are connected to connotation, burden, reconciliation, and understanding. The word promise itself is an emotional word, right? We all know that. If you promise to do something, there's a sense that there is an emotional stake, that there's something psychologically significant. They know that, and they know that's how you guys tend to read. The correct answer is B, a simple household task. And people get this wrong repeatedly because the context of the whole passage feels emotional. There's, like I said, there's a fraught mother-son dynamic. The other answers give you emotionally laden words, but that is not how you can read successfully on SAT. You have to read hyper-literal, hyper-legal. And when they ask about promise in line 23, they're almost asking like a pronoun antecedent relationship, even though this isn't a pronoun. It's the same setup. Promise refers to what, and the same way they, this, or it would refer to what antecedent. And so in this case, it's a basic task. It's a chore, like fixing a fence. This is the other really sort of shocking, interesting, fascinating, and like maybe a little infuriating too, way that they punish typical reading practices and that you'll get wrong answers. I call this the inverted language problem. This is so strange, and let me put it to you in like a kind of simple setup. So when I say there's inverted language on the exam, what I'm saying is that they will use opposite words to communicate the same idea. The passage will say, Jim is always fast. The correct answer will say, Jim was never slow. When they put fast and slow like that, and they're using qualifiers to bring them to the center and make them equivalent, your brain cannot process those opposites quickly enough. If people haven't talked about this or had a conversation with someone like me, like I'm having with you guys right now, your brain will reject those two things as being opposite. And so this is how they sort of entrap you guys, by using opposite words to communicate the same idea. Conversely, they will also use the same words to create opposite ideas. And in question number 52, this is a really tough double passage on science. And if you look at, let me read 52 actually, just the actual question and answers. According to the author of Passage 2, tumors and viruses are similar in that both are. Similar in that both are, if you gloss this and paraphrase it, you have to gloss it as similarity. Similar in that both equals similar. If you look at lines 74 and 75, let me read it out for us. If tumors are essentially parasitic life forms struggling for survival, might viruses be similar yet more rudimentary forms? Similar yet more, you have to gloss is meaning different. So they literally use the word similarity to craft a difference by pairing it with the word yet more. But see, when people are rushing through this exam, it's literally the last question. It's question 52 on a tough reading question. Your brain will never see this. You will get trapped. You will pick B because B sounds exactly like line 74 and 75. Similar in the question, similar in that both sounds exactly like similar yet more when you read it in a casual way that you read conceptually, like you do in your coursework. So you have to start reading legally. You have to start noticing these kinds of cues to sort of escape these traps that are baked into the way the test is built. It's your brain. So to kind of sum up, similar and similar are both being used, but they're being used in opposite ways. So same word, opposite meaning. And also we covered opposite words, slow and fast, to mean the same exact thing. This is the kind of stuff that if you don't work on it beforehand, you will never be able to catch it during the test. But happily, this is the kind of stuff for people trying to boost the score if you're taking it in December. Now that we've even talked about this tonight, you can now recognize this. You can now see this, and you can be aware it is especially relevant on questions that have any kind of polar language, like high, low, light, dark, left, right, same, different. And so now you have a weapon, like in your back pocket, a tool to sort of catch this inverted language and deal with it. It is 6:27, friends. See, this is I love teaching SAT reading because it's fun to go down these rabbit holes. I think can we hop back over now? I feel like how many questions do we have in the chat? Let me see. I can keep talking extemporaneously, but I almost want to make sure.
Yeah,
Let's
no, no worries. We have a few more prepared questions. I'm
Oh, yeah.
actually gonna reshare my screen if that's okay with
Oh, for
you.
sure, for sure.
And then, okay, great. So actually, before we go into some of the other questions that we had, and then also like audience Q&A, of course, we wanted to really quickly talk about some of the classes that you actually will be teaching, Dr. Neiman, very soon, because obviously that was a fantastic demo. So I'm sure a lot of students and parents out there might be kind of curious right now. So here are some of the sessions that Dr. Neiman will be teaching this winter. The first one on the left here is a really special one, the SAT 10-day all-in-one strategy course that goes from December to January. So actually, by being at the session, you will be receiving an exclusive $390 off coupon code that only all of you guys on the call will have access to. So this is an intensive 10-day course that goes over all the subjects in the SAT and helps to raise your score by hundreds of points last minute. And so this discount code expires on December 1st. So make sure to register as soon as possible. I'm going to send the exclusive payment link with the discounted price through the chat for all of you guys to sign up or take a look at right now. So here it is. I just sent the link. The other three classes that I will just really quickly go over that are coming up in 2021 are called the SAT mock test strategy and review classes, which those classes consist of students taking a graded practice test each week and then immediately going over it with personalized attention to their mistakes and offering strategies to fix them. We call it the SAT 1500 plus course because that's the score that we aim for with our students in the class. And then finally, we have the SAT Common Traps course, which goes over the common mistakes that students make on the SAT, such as the ones that Dr. Neiman just mentioned in his PowerPoint, and review strategies to resolve those common mistakes. So the the link for all these courses is going into the chat now, where you can find all of the courses that we just mentioned in this PowerPoint slide. And then just really quickly, one last thing is if you're curious about these classes, but not sure if you should take them, Dr. Neiman will be doing a free trial class on December 5th to allow you to experience his teaching style directly. So this will be an interactive online classroom, as all of our paid classes are, rather than this webinar style that we're currently having right now. So in addition, if you register for any of our paid courses, like the discounted course that I mentioned earlier, and if you attend this free trial class and realize that you didn't enjoy it or didn't find it helpful, we always guarantee a full refund on your registered course. So make sure you come to this very critical session on December 5th. One last link that I'm sending in the chat right now. This is going to be the registration link for the free trial class on December 5th with Dr. Neiman. So I see some questions, but we'll get to those in a second. So if you have any questions about these courses that we just mentioned, as well as the free trial class, make sure to contact us. So actually, we have an academic advisor on the call who will stick around at the end to answer any questions that you might have about the courses. And so let's just get back into our Q&A. So I see that it's already 6:30, and we do want to open up for audience Q&A at this point. So I'm going to kind of field the questions as we go. I'll take audience Q&A, but then I'll also try to get some of these questions that we had pre-planned also to ask to Dr. Neiman. So very quickly, let's see. Okay, so an anonymous attendee asks, what is the correct answer for the last example, Dr. Neiman, that you showed? I think number 52?
It was A. Yep. And I can even say just like about letter A, it was similar to the earlier question we covered in the fiction. I know it's a different genre, but A was a quote bad answer that was technically correct, and there is no good line for it. And so if you don't use the strategy to remove the incorrect answers, if you try to confirm, you will read and skim forever, and you probably even if you got it correct, it would take up way too much time. And so that's why those strategies for dealing with B, C, and D are so important rather than trying to choose A proactively. Yeah, so it was A. Hmm.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
And then another question in the chat from Brian.
I saw.
I know this session was about the reading section, although
I think I cut out. Hold on a second. Can you guys still hear me okay? I think.
yes, you're perfect.
Oh,
Sorry,
oh,
that might have
awesome.
been on my end.
Oh, yeah, yeah, awesome. Yeah. But Brian's question about the essay, I absolutely recommend that you guys take the SAT essay. Let me say this, that I know as a writing instructor at the college level, colleges need as much information as they can get about people's writing proficiencies. And it is something that if it's not required, this I kind of hit this note a little bit earlier, but it bears repeating. Just because something is not required doesn't mean that it doesn't influence other decisions that get made during the admissions process. And universities have a lot of pressure right now to focus on equity and accessibility. And so they will value things that they will not require. So they will value scores or value pieces of info about your application that they cannot say that they require it. So I think A, it gives them useful information that they want about your writing skills and how you will figure into the campus and how the course enrollment is organized. The other thing about this though is SAT essay is highly coachable, highly beatable, and highly doable. And so if you have something that you can master and actually have more control over compared to reading or writing, why not do it and why not get a great score on it? Because if you prep enough on SAT essay, you can slam dunk it, get a wonderful score, and then that will help pad your application. So I'm a big proponent of doing that and taking that step to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then we had another question, except it's not really a question, in the Q&A box. I don't know if you can see it, Dr. Neiman, but it seems like a student really, really enjoyed taking your class and just wanted to say that she loved taking your class. That's
That's
awesome.
so nice. Yeah. I love teaching you guys. It's really like I always make the joke that we can love to hate the test together. And that the test is something that can be interesting and fun. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but it really is developing logic muscles too that transcend the exam. And this kind of reading and even in the writing section too, these skills are really important at going into other arenas in life of having this facility over language and being able to think quickly on your feet. These things are really relevant. So I really enjoy coaching you guys through the test. It's fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's get through maybe some of the questions that we have on the PowerPoint while we're waiting for any other audience Q&A questions.
Yeah.
So I guess you kind of answered the first one a little bit already. Go ahead and actually take your pick, actually, whichever ones you want to answer.
I feel like that obsolete thing, I really want to reemphasize that for you guys that this is such a cultural dialogue right now about what's going to happen to standardized testing. And I feel like it can't go anywhere because we're going to all see this, like depending on what schools do what thing. But I was talking with my 7ED friends like in the past few days how the UC system seems like it's taken one of the most bold moves and at least gone test blind for a finite amount of time. But if you read the stories more deeply and you don't just look at the headlines, that's another whole like rhetorical lesson that the headlines about testing are written very poorly and they usually don't make distinctions between test optional and test blind and what that really entails. But even the UC system, they are now in development for making their own exam. And so what I think they're going to do is now require all UC applicants to all branch schools. They're going to have their own test set up. And I've read a lot of commentary about this that it seems kind of like a cynical move to just sort of quote get rid of the SAT and then now replace it with another exam. But when I read that, it made total sense to me that as much as we might feel like testing, some people argue it's not like a measurement of future success, and that's a whole different debate. It still is some kind of necessity when you're organizing a huge amount of people that you need some sort of common denominator, measuring stick to figure out where should we put these people in sequential classes. If you have to figure out if there's a four class math series or if there's a 3 class writing series, where do you put everybody? And so if you get rid of all these common measurements, it's going to create a lot of chaos, I think, if people don't have a common measuring stick. Let me
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess another question on the slide: how should students know if they should retake the SAT, sorry, after they've taken the test?
Right. I think that if you do the legwork and just do some research on which schools you're applying to and what they are saying is the common range of scores, that should be the first step, a first practical step. But and you're talking to someone who, I mean, I took my tests multiple times, except for my GREs. I only took those once when I was going before my PhD. But I usually tell people that you don't want to like take them compulsively, but it is good to start sooner rather than later, and that a retake I think is an opportunity to only keep improving. And so I'm a big advocate of trying to always set the bar higher for yourself. I've had so many students that say they'll have a 1250 and they'll say I can't get over a 1400. I've had students at the 1400 say I can't get over a 1490, and they do. And so I think it's important to always leave that room for yourself to keep trying and to keep doing more. Yeah. It was just
Great. Yeah.
yeah.
The next question: what are the must-know strategies for acing the test? I think you covered some of these in the demo as well, but if you have any others that you might want to.
Yeah, I feel like the must know strategy that I think is the most important strategy is knowing how to read in more than one mode. And I did set you guys up tonight a little bit to think through not reading conceptually, but reading literally or reading almost legally. And that other type of reading mode is the end all be all strategy that you have to know. That I was sitting in a group class recently and we had this like really funny comedic moment where it was a terrible double history passage. All my students were having this deep debate over like the politics of the passage and the concepts and all these details. And I said to everybody, I was like, guys, I was like, look at letter B. Like, and they were quiet. And I was like, there is a cue that I've coached you into noticing in letter B. Dead silence. Nobody was saying anything. The chat was dead. And I was like, guys, keep looking at it. I was like, it's staring you right in the face. And this is when we talk about a must know strategy, this is it, that it's like it's there in front of you, but you can't see it. It's almost like an optical illusion. And in this case, It was what I always coach people into noticing: quantity cues. The word politicians had an S on it. And in the passage, there was only one politician mentioned. And so they dropped that S on it. And the trap answer that 90% of the class put, they didn't notice the S on politicians. And they were worried about the concepts in that answer, the political concepts, not the S at the end of the noun. And so that was it. And they all groaned and they were like, oh my God, that's so stupid. And I was like, it is stupid, but it's very objective and real, and it's also predictable. You know, like after I work with you guys on these ideas, you can anticipate when you see those quantity cues, you start there, you go there first. So I feel like that must know strategy is learning how to switch reading modes to go from, you guys already know how to read conceptually, so I want to help you guys read like a little bit more literally and more aggressively in like a kind of like a legal fashion. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. Do these strategies for SAT reading also apply to the AP English reading?
You know, of course, I would say that there is always overlap, that no matter what classes I'm ever teaching, there is so much that you can say is similar about the skill sets you develop. It really, I think, are you talking about the actual, like, the multiple choice? Because there are, this is funny that you asked that, because even I've done SAT Lit subject test, you know, I do graduate exams too, like GRE Lit, and these strategies do apply where they will use the same type of peculiar, very nitty-gritty specific trap techniques, even on the literature. Like, so, you know, in the literature exam, they might use a quantity cue, you know, in a strange spot, and that's what makes the answer wrong. So this absolutely has crossover, without a doubt. For sure.
Great, thank you. And an anonymous attendee says, I really enjoyed your lecture. I would like to know if you also help students on their college essays.
Yes, we absolutely do that. It's actually one of my favorite. I really enjoy doing college essay prep too. Like I just worked with someone, and we only had a couple classes, and that was all we needed. The thing that she said in the class that made me happy, the biggest struggle with college essays is that we all write them as if they're academic papers, and that's not what the admissions committee want to hear. They don't want to hear an essay. They want to hear your voice. And so I really enjoy helping you guys tap into writing something that sounds more like you, not like some sort of canned paper that you feel like you have to write. Like it's usually an opportunity for you guys to kind of reflect and have an introspective moment and write something about yourself that you feel proud of and that you feel like is interesting and meaningful. So I love doing the essay too, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Neiman.
Yeah.
I guess we can keep going on the questions on the PowerPoint here for just maybe let's take one last question actually. So how do we avoid running out of time on the test as we have run out of time on this event?
Yep, I tell you what, I struggled with pacing the most when I was your guys' age. Like I had a perfectionism problem, and so I wanted to be 125% perfect before I moved on. And it really was an issue because you not only you can't be 100% sure, you only need to be like 70% sure, and then you can move on. So that's one way to avoid running out of time, is to understand where that threshold really is for confidence without certainty. And that's something that you learn through practice, and you learn through, you know, we talk about that when we work through answers. Even the cues we talked about tonight, noticing a quantity cue, noticing inverted language, that's the kind of stuff that will save you really valuable seconds and minutes. And so that's really important. You also have to learn, like with all the teaching and learning, it's important to relax and let go. And I always tell this funny story that when I got my perfect ACT score, I was so frustrated because the proctor was literally, this was back in the day, and the proctor was in the room, and he had a newspaper and he was reading this newspaper above me, and he had like a huge breakfast. I was like, who is this person? It sounded like a cartoon skit. He had like plates and food and a newspaper, and there were like crumbs raining down on me. And I was so annoyed because I was distracted. And I was like, I'm gonna blow it. Like it's too distracting. I'm not gonna be able to do well. And I nailed it. I killed it. And I think it was because I was distracted just enough that it helped me relax somehow. Like it helped me sort of like let go and just do what I know I needed to do. And so I think who knows? Like sometimes there's funny lessons like that that we can stumble across, like when we're doing class too. That maybe for pacing, it's a matter of technique and execution, and then also relaxing after you have the right technique and execution, and not not trying to grip too hard, like on what you're doing. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Neiman.
yeah.
For those of you who are asking about the recording for tonight's event, I'm going to go ahead and send through the chat in just a second a link to our YouTube channel where we always upload all of our recordings of all of these events. Clearly, this was an awesome event. Thank you so much, Dr. Neiman, for everything that you've shared with us tonight. I think everyone definitely learned something coming out of this. So I'm going to send through the chat box right now a list of every single event that I talked about, including the free trial class for the SAT reading, as well as an event later on in December about ED results, early decision results coming out, and what to do next, as well as all of the links to some of the classes that Dr. Neiman and others will be teaching about the SAT this winter, and all of our contact information. So a big chat coming to all of you guys right now. Go ahead and take a look at that and make sure you click on any of the links that are necessary. And that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this wonderful event tonight. And thank you especially to Dr. Neiman for sharing with us your wisdom. We'll see you very soon at our next free trial class coming up in December 5th. So see everyone next time. Thank you all so much. And we're going to have some 70DU academic advisors who will stick on this call for a little bit just to answer any questions that you might have. So feel free to unmute or drop in the chat if you have any questions. All right. Thank
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.